Hello, and welcome to Vulcan Media. Today we will be covering on how to remove the thermal paste and replace said thermal paste on an MSI R9 390X. There are many reasons you might want to replace the thermal paste, such as wanting lower temperatures, or wanting to maintain those temperatures at a lower fan speed. This will, of course, improve acoustics as well as extend the life of your fans. Now, the MSI R9 390X that we've been working with was far hotter than it should be at basically any situation. It idled at 50 degrees Celsius, which would make sense if the fans were off like most MSI cards are, but in this case it's not. The fans were running at 1,106 rotations per minute, which is not that fast, but I mean, geez, that's idle. 50 degrees at that fan speed? That's a problem. So we wanted to get a good baseline before we did the changing of the thermal paste. So we ran Heaven Benchmark for 10 minutes at ultra quality, extreme tessellation, 8 times anti-aliasing, and 1440p. So you know this was a pretty hard stress test. So the temperature maxed out at 80 degrees Celsius. At the fans, we're hitting 2,222 rotations per minute, which is really fast. So it was quite noisy, and the room was very hot because this is a 390X. I mean, holy crud. Anyone who's had a 390X knows that it works exactly like a space heater. So, well, let's jump right into the changing of the thermal paste, and we'll see exactly how it works out in the end. An important thing to note is that these temperatures weren't just way too high in a synthetic benchmark that unrealistically stretches the GPU. We were playing Gmod, and it was hitting 65 degrees Celsius on Gary's mod. I mean, that is an old game. That shouldn't even be stressing the GPU. That should be basically, you know, almost identical to idle for a 390X. So this repasting was very necessary and long overdue, if you ask me. So, the first step to repasting a graphics card is to remove the backplate. You can do this by unscrewing all the screws that is on the backplate, as you might expect. So, what you're going to want to do is make sure that you don't confuse these screws with any other screws that you're going to remove during the build. It would be difficult to because they are significantly different than any other screw, but, you know, just be careful. What you don't want to do is remove these 4 screws in the middle. Those 4 screws in the middle are what actually holds the GPU to the PCB. So those will be coming later. Once you have all the screws out, you're just going to easily lift away the backplate. Once you have the backplate out of the way, you're going to take off the bracket. Now there should be 3 screws on the bracket itself, and then 1 kind of tucked away that screws it into the PCB instead of the cooler. Now, you're also going to have to remove the little screws around the DVI ports, or HDMI, or VGA if you're doing an older graphics card, but the 390X that we're working with doesn't have them. So we don't need to worry about doing any of the VGA ports. So once you've unscrewed it all, just pull the bracket off and you're good to go. So I know I accidentally filmed this a little bit out of frame, but there's not much we can do about it now as we've already done the thermal pasting. Jeez, okay, first video is not going too well, but whatever. So in a cross fashion, so we're talking top left corner, bottom right corner, you're going to want to unscrew those 4 screws. And then once you've unscrewed them, just lift away the cooler off of the PCB. Then you're going to want to get a pad of some sort and cover it in isopropyl alcohol and scrub the die clean. Once you've scrubbed the die clean, what you're going to want to do is get some thermal paste and, well, open it, which is something that we struggled with a little bit, but we got it open eventually, and just put a small line long ways down the GPU. We probably used a little bit much, but it shouldn't matter too much because what really matters is the dispersion. Now this is the trickiest part of the entire thing, in my opinion at least, is actually putting the cooler back on. Now you have to make sure that you don't accidentally, break anything. So once you've press this cooler down evenly as you can, and you flipped it back over. You're going to want to do bottom left corner, top right corner, and then top left corner, bottom right corner, in that order with the screws, or at least roughly that order. Basically, you want to do another crisscross shape, and that should help with the dispersion of the thermal paste. And that's the whole thing that you want to alleviate, the issue that MSI had. Now, our camera died, so we didn't film ourselves putting the bracket or the back of the GPU back on, but here it is. This is the final product. It should look exactly the way it did initially. Make sure you plug all of the fans back in, because otherwise you will have a graphics card without spinning fans. Not ideal. And I shouldn't mention about the warranty sticker. If you live in the United States, don't worry about it. That can't do anything to you. And that is how you successfully replace the thermal paste on your MSI R9 390X. The idle temperatures changed from 50 degrees at 1106 RPM to 44 degrees at 0 RPM, which is totally amazing. That's a huge difference. So it went from being, relatively quiet at 50 degrees to totally silent because there's no moving parts at 44 degrees. Wow. That is far more than I expected to even gain at all from the thermal paste change. Unfortunately, this change wasn't quite so dramatic under load, so instead of having 80 degrees at 2,222 RPM, now we're at 79 degrees at 2,133 RPM after 10 minutes of the Heaven benchmark totally maxed out at 1440p. So the RPM was decreased significantly by nearly 100, and the temperature was down by 1 degree, although that's within the margin of error, so we're going to count that as basically the same. So we get a quieter experience at the same performance metrics, which is totally great. Unfortunately, this data might not be perfectly reflected because we were using a computer that was being less than cooperative. The new AMD Radeon drivers apparently do not like the 390X quite as much as they like my personal GPU, the Fury. I haven't had any issues, but we had some problems getting Wattman to open up. So the first metrics are taken using Wattman, and the second metrics are taken using Afterburner. So I hope any differences are minimal at most. So that was our video on how to replace the thermal paste on your MSI R9 390X. Please leave a comment, rate, and subscribe if you enjoyed our content. We would really appreciate it if, anyone's looking to replace the thermal paste on their own GPU, you send them our way so that we can tell them how to do it for you. Give us a little bit of a hand with that publicity. Obviously, if you didn't like our videos, you can leave a dislike or don't. I don't really control you in that way. But regardless of your opinions on our videos, I hope you have a nice day. Goodbye. And handle this shit. Fuck. Oh, dude, this is not gonna look good. I don't know if we're gonna be able to include this. You just hit the graphics card, dumbass.
Don't worry, it's good.
In camera.